Hello and welcome to A Girl, a Guy, and a Buffy podcast. I'm Charles,
Hi, and I'm Kate.
and we are here. We are two friends discussing Buffy the Vampire Slayer and all its wonders and glory. We talk about all things Buffy. We are a spoilery Buffy podcast. So if you have not watched the show, please go back and watch it. But today we're doing a little bit something different for this bonus episode. We are going to be doing, drum roll please. We are going to be doing an overview and a review of Slayers of Buffyverse Story. So
Yay!
excited!
Very excited.
Now, please be forewarned. This is your spoiler alert. If you have not listened to the entire Audible audio series of Buffy, Slayers of Buffyverse Story, please go finish listening to that before you listen to Our Girl and a Guy and a Buffy podcast, because we are going to spoil the heck out of this book series. This has been like 20 years in the making. Like, we've been waiting this forever. I was like a kid on Christmas.
Yes, I definitely was super excited to listen for the first time when it popped into my Audible app about a month ago.
So, Kate, what was your like first thoughts? Like when you first heard that it was coming out, what was the thing that came to mind?
Oh, my first thoughts. I don't think I can remember that far back. I mean, I think I was like super excited, but of course, lots of questions. I wasn't as confused about the format, I think, as some people were, because I knew that even though it's going to be on Audible and people think of Audible just as like books on tape,
Mhm.
um, I was like, well, it's not a book. I knew that. So I was like, it must be some sort of like radio drama, which I actually growing up some on when we were younger, my mom started on trips, like car trips, going to the library and pulling tapes of old timey radio shows
Oh
and
yeah.
like radio dramas. So like I was actually had a history of listening to them. So that's kind of in my head what I was picturing. And of course, like, we knew some of the key characters who were going to be involved in it. But you're like, how is this going to work? And when there's alternate or there's universe crossing, but like, what does that mean? And yeah, so many questions. Always questions.
So many. So I was originally thinking, I was a little unclear at first. I was like, is this, is this a book? Is this a podcast? Like, is this radio drama? What is this? Um, and then when I saw it was like broken up into episodes and different things, I was like, well, then this must be sort of like, an audio drama, like some sort of like podcasty sort of scripted drama, which those I love. I love a good like scripted podcast thing. Um, I mean, when I did a horrible production, not horrible, it was a weird production of 10 Little Indians in college that got turned into a radio drama. So it was super weird, like, but it was live on stage. It was a wild time. Not, not what any of us had signed up for, but I am so glad that all like the original cast members signed up for this, because
Yeah,
that's the
absolutely.
thing that really was like the spark of joy, and that it was like, oh, it's Charisma and James and Anthony, like they're all back, and it's just so it's just it's a delight. I
It
don't
is.
have
I
the
mean,
words.
it's exciting to see that they're still as passionate about the series because I could completely understand being like, that was 20 years ago. I'm done. I've moved on. Some of us have really, had really bad experiences during that time. I don't want to revisit it. So I could completely understand, people not coming back or a lot of the main actors for our favorite characters not coming back. So the fact that they did, so much love and appreciation for them doing that, and agreeing to be a part of it.
Yeah, and there's this thing I think about like sort of a love for each other as like human
Yeah.
beings and being friends and stuff like that. Because when you looked at some of the the clips that Audible was using as promotion for it, and like just those moments of like Amber Benson like crying, she was like, I'm so happy that this happened and everyone came back. Like you can tell that there's genuine love
Yeah.
between those people, and um how they interact with each other and how they've kept in touch with each other over the years.
definitely. And I think as fans, we always hope that's the case.
Yes.
And you have to recognize it's still a workplace for them. And if you think about places you worked, you do not always get along with people. You are not always family with people.
Right.
But when you watch them playing these characters and you see them as your family, so you
Mhm.
want behind the scenes to be that way. So it's always nice to know when it is and it does happen that way.
It's wonderful. I mean, it's so exciting, and the idea that like the pivot of this story. I mean, they talk about it's a Buffyverse story, and we're not talking about Buffy. Like we've already established that Buffy is not involved in this.
Yeah.
Um, and that there's this idea that there's going to be some sort of redemption, for these beloved characters that fans kind of felt like got a bum deal, and in their storytelling and what happened to them. So I think that's really exciting to get a chance to believe is a redemptive arc for their characters.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Since Amber was part of the writing and directing team of it all, and I'm sure, I imagine, and again, I don't know, I wasn't in the room. I wish I was. I really wish I was. Next time, you guys, next time, I just want to be a fly on the wall. I will pay for that privilege just to sit in a recording session with that. But I you would think that hopefully everyone kind of comes to the table with some ideas. The story has written, but some collaborative, this collaborative art making, which would be really exciting to be like, what's the back and forth that's happening behind the scenes and all of that. I think that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm sure they talked about it at the press appearances, particularly the conventions they've been appearing at. I'm sure you got more backstory about how the whole production came together, but it would have been fun to see even more like promotional videos
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. Ugh. I want to sit down and talk with all of them about this. I'm so like, this is, I mean, it's new Buffyverse. I guess we have to get used to saying that, like Buffyverse content,
Yes.
and changing our language around that. But like, yeah, new Buffyverse content in 20 years, and it's so, oh, it's just so exciting. It's so exciting. Like stuff that's not comic book based. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't even remember when the last comic came out. It's been a while. It hasn't
It's
been that
been a
long,
while.
but not
Yeah, it's been
not
several years.
that
I
long.
mean, they've rebooted the series in comics where they went back to high school
Hmm.
and but like there's been different storylines. Like I think if I remember reading correctly, like an article about the comic coming out, like Willow was already going to be gay, like
Hmm.
already knew she was gay, like in high school, and
Gotcha.
that was the only one the only thing I remembered.
Yeah, I
So
haven't really
they've
looked.
turned it very much into like a comic universe,
Hmm.
where there's multiple runs of different comics and different versions of the verse. Um, Not having been a comic book fan, I'm more just like stick it to the show. I mean, I think that's fine and fun, but as far as like considering like what's actual, like, I guess canon, I'm much more like all about the shows personally.
So here's the question. Here's the like million
Yeah.
dollar question.
Yeah.
Do you consider this to be canon?
I do, which it sort of throws off my own take on everything because technically the first run of comics that were directed by Joss Whedon, like seasons, what they considered seasons 8 through 12.
Hmm.
I mean, it built on what happened in Chosen. And I guess partly why it's more a case of what do I like, what do I don't like. And there was a lot I didn't like about that run of the comics. So
Sure.
that's why I don't want to consider it canon.
I
Whereas
think many of us.
overall, I like what happened in Slayer as a Buffyverse story. So I'm like, yes, I'm fine with considering that canon. So really, that's what it comes down to. Did Kate like what happened or not?
And does that make it canon? I'm here for it.
Correct.
No, I'm here for it because I honestly I read the comic book. It's been a very long time, and so I kind of
Yeah.
remember some stuff that happens, but not everything. I'm definitely not an expert in the comics. But I do know like there's stuff in there like Dawn and Xander have a baby and all that stuff, and that's just weird to me, and I can't really buy that. It doesn't feel right. It makes me feel weird. I have to go back and look at it all again and just like
Yeah.
maybe that's some wintertime reading that I go back and like revisit
Yeah.
that. But I want to believe that this is canon. I want to believe that this is canon so that it can continue the lore and so that it can continue the story in a way, because I think everyone keeps talking about, oh, well, should there be a reboot? Should there not be a reboot? Oh, well, I don't want to reboot, leave it alone, blah, 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 blah. And there's all of those things. I just think that this is such a great way to do a reboot of the series in a way that for me works. It just really works for me. Like it brings back all the characters that you love. It gives them new dimension, new depth, new life, and it allows you to continue the story while still sort of touching back on all the old things that you really liked about it and making references back there and being like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was so much fun. So it feels, for me, it feels fresh and new and delightful, quite frankly. I love it. I love it. I'm here for it. So for me, I'm considering it canon, whether it is or not. Also, they got permission. They had to get permission from everyone who produced the show and who owned the rights to the show in order to do this in the first place. So I feel like if they said yes to this, then
True, but I mean that's true of the comics, all the comics,
yeah, but I feel
'cause
like
otherwise they
I would.
couldn't do it.
Yes, but I feel like this is different because we're talking
Yeah.
about like the original actors coming back and doing it, and especially considering everything that happened and all the stuff that's come out, that this feels like an olive branch and a way for the artist to reclaim the art and also for the fans to reclaim the universe so that we can separate, so that we can take some separation of something that we loved because we loved these characters, we loved these actors playing these characters, we loved this world that was created, and there was something that wasn't so great about it, and so we're separating those two things a little bit more, and that's the thing that I love about it. So I'm all in on it. I'm all in on it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I would have been okay with some sort of continuation reboot of like in TV if there was a story that made sense.
Sure.
Even if it only brought back, if there were any interest in it, but if it only brought back a couple old characters and most of it was new, certainly with the way Chosen ended, it opened it up for an incredible amount of storytelling
Hmm.
potential, following
Sure.
other Slayers, um, following a branch of the whatever the new council is called, like, assuming they set up offices around the world, you could follow, you could be in Japan, you could be in, Africa, you could be wherever, in New York City. So, I think there was always potential there, but the doing the radio drama through Audible, I think, is a fantastic way to do it and still be able to bring back the actors who originated these characters
Hmm.
and not just necessarily have to go in a completely new direction. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm totally in. Right now I'm considering it canon as well. I think it continues the story of the Buffyverse overall in a really good way.
Yeah. And so the story itself picks up. So there's some debate. I
Yeah.
say it's 10 years. I think it's 10 years after Chosen. That's kind of what I have sort of sussed out.
Okay. So I feel like they're off a little in their math because I know at one point during his like beginning narration, Spike says it's been a dozen years or something about a dozen years. So that was like 12 years. And then I did the math of Cordelia being chosen at 15. She's been a Slayer for 19 years. That means it's 2015, which would be a dozen years. But then Indira says she was in kindergarten
Right.
when the Slayers were activated. All the Slayers were activated, which usually is 6 years old in the US.
5 or 6.
5 or 6. I mean, it depends. Most are six going,
Depending on when her
into.
birthday is, because I was
It's
5 in
true.
kindergarten and I have a
Yeah,
summer birthday.
but it's changed a lot since we were younger. Like
Well, that's true.
when I was that age, you could actually still go in at like 4 years old if you
Right.
were like just past the cutoff. Um, so she could have been 5. So that would, but either way, that's only like 10 or 11 years.
Right. So, and I felt
Because there's a little bit of math issue. Like they
I
should have said she was like in preschool or
right.
like
I literally thought they
pre-K.
said somewhere, and I swear I've listened. I'm gonna have to listen to it a fourth time to like, because I think there is an actual number said, but because I do remember him saying a dozen, but
Yeah. So
for whatever reason, that 10 years is sticks in my head because I think there was something sort of definitive that said that, but I can't remember what that thing is right now. So I feel bad about not knowing that. But we're looking at 10 to 12 years
yeah, so it's either
after that,
2013 or
or 20,
2015.
yeah, somewhere in there. So
Yeah.
we're still looking at a time like iPhones came out around like 2008-ish. So we're like an iPhone like 3 or 4 land or
Oh
whatever.
yeah,
Like
like
we're still early, but also the Buffyverse has never been big on like the use of technology and the use of like modern day technology in their storytelling. Um,
true.
so
I
I
feel
think,
like that would start to change though. I think part of that was like he didn't want to make it too easy, but then I think at one point, which is why they get like cell phones in season 7, if everybody's doing cell phones and smartphones, like it doesn't make sense to artificially be like, oh, like nobody has a smartphone. Like really, everybody has a smartphone.
but
And you're
they,
like,
oh, go ahead, go ahead.
no, it would seem, I mean, some of the characters might not. I could see Spike still being like a flip phone person. But that being said, like they would all have phones to me.
But that's so here's the thing is that the only person who has a phone is Indira.
True, but we don't know what technology is like in the other universe.
Right. But when we're in like the universe that we know,
Yeah.
all the like when the whole conversation, like when they're trying to reach Giles and all that stuff, Spike is going at like Spike doesn't have a cell phone. Like
Yeah, but
Spike doesn't
that's Spike like
right.
refusing to
Spike does
like
not have a cell phone.
yeah.
They are Spike and Clem are not rolling around with like an iPhone 4.
Right.
Like,
Right.
they just
Right.
don't have it because he's going into gas stations borrowing phones to make phone calls on a
Yeah.
landline. And
Yeah.
Giles doesn't have one either because he's freaking maybe he does.
I
Maybe
was
he
like,
does
technically we don't know that he does it. It's just that he could have left the shop so quick
without
because of
his. Yes.
Anyanka attacking that he
Right.
didn't have his. Yes.
Because Olivia has one.
Correct.
Because yes, we know Olivia has one.
Right.
So maybe he does and he just left his at home
Yeah, I
because
feel
she
like
had to get out.
Olivia would be like super on top of like trends and like being making Giles like join Facebook and like getting his like artistic profile pic. I
They
just see her like doing that so you can still stay connected to the like quote unquote kids, even though they're all in their like 30s now.
Well, here's the thing. You know that the bookstore has like an Instagram page. Like
Oh, like
there's fully
totally.
like an Instagram page for that bookstore. That's
Which
actually no, it's a MySpace page. He fully has a MySpace page because Insta hasn't even like if we're at when did Insta come out? It was Insta around in 2013 or 2015,
I
maybe
don't
early days.
remember.
There's
Yeah.
definitely a Twitter page going on for that bookstore.
Yeah.
Like a Facebook page, maybe a MySpace.
No, you know that Giles has like a part-time person helping him who's young and like
Sure.
totally handles all the like the website.
That's
If
what
they
Olivia's doing.
no, I
Olivia's
totally see him having a part-time help who's like in their early 20s and like going to college or something and they're handling the website, they're handling the social media and just like always ragging Giles on about it.
he can't get it right. He just
Yeah.
can't get it right. Um
He's calling it like Instabook or Twit or like
although and they do and Indira is plugged in because she does they are making references and again it shows like the disconnect in technology because
yeah,
Indira does talk about she's all in the subreddits and all of that stuff and
yes.
Clem is like oh what angsty tink slang like like he doesn't know what a Reddit page is.
Yes. Well, as we're like slowly learning about Clem is like super old.
I'm freaking loving Clem. Like
Oh my God. I think
I
Clem is like my new favorite character. Like,
I
so happy they included him. He killed it.
brilliant choice to add
Killed
Clem
it.
into this. So okay, so let's talk about,
Yeah.
we're kind of like all over the place, and we might be all over the place with this because
Yeah.
there's just so much to talk about, and it's
Yeah.
just so juicy. It's so juicy.
All right. So overall impressions, sense of the story. How do you feel about the whole thing?
Okay. I'm sorry, my excitement is, I'm really trying hard to contain my excitement about this book. Um,
Listeners, we are doing this on Zoom so I can see him. I think the excitement is like literally pouring out of his pores.
like I literally, I'm not gonna lie, there were multiple times that I cried. Um, and several times that I got chill bumps, and several times that I clapped. And like was so excited about things that were happening and things
100%.
that were said. Um, like I said before, I think for me, this was just one of the best ways to sort of to reintroduce these characters, this content, to give us the story, to make something old new again that felt fresh and familiar all at the same time. And it for me, it just, as a fan, I just was like, I was here. It was like meeting old friends again and being like, oh my gosh. And then you just picked up right where you left off. That's how I felt. And then and I liken it to like your friends that you know in college or whatever, like friends you knew like when you were like younger in your 20s or whatever, and you haven't seen them in like 20 years, 15, 20 years, and then you meet them again and you see them and the vibe is right and you all are catching up and you're like, oh, this is great. But then you really start talking and you really get a chance to like know what they've gone through and really talk about it. And you're like, and I'm still here for it. Like, we may have gone through things have changed, but I am still here for you. And I'm still like, I want this thing to work. I want this friendship to be a thing. That's how I felt.
Yeah, I can totally see that. It's a good analogy.
How about you?
So yeah, so during the first listen, which I binged within the like first couple of days of it coming out, I felt the same way you did. I was so excited. I clapped at times. There were definitely emotional moments that made me tear up. So many laughs. I was impressed with the references and callbacks, but
Mhm.
that they were used in a way that worked and it didn't feel gratuitous just to be like, oh, look what we're doing for the fans. Um, yeah, I mean, overall, I really loved it. It did take me back to that world, and I felt super connected to the characters and just back amongst friends again.
I mean, yeah, it was such a
Freezing.
good thing.
So then I did a second listen, mostly because I had tapped out on like all my podcasts that week, and I was like, I got nothing else to listen to. I was like, let me go back and re-listen, and definitely enjoyed it. By this third listen, and partly because I was doing it for the podcast and like taking notes, and it was a little more chore like because I was had to pay attention so much. There was a little bit a sense of diminishing returns.
Hmm.
I didn't quite have the same level of how to describe it. I was going to say excitement. I think that's part of it. I think the excitement just wore off. So it's more like what comes next.
Sure. Yeah,
Like I want to
absolutely.
know that there's more coming. I think that's part of it. Yeah, I'm so glad it exists. I'm so glad they did it. I want more. I hope we get more. You and I the other day we were kind of prepping for this, like was wondering how well did it do. And so this is about what more like 3 weeks out since it premiered, and we saw that it was like number 10 on the rankings of Audible's most popular um listens. And so we were like, yay, even 3 weeks in, it's still within the top 10. So that's a good sign. Like fingers crossed if the story's there and the actors want to return or new actors want to come in, because obviously we were left with a cliffhanger with a couple characters.
Yeah.
So there's potential for the return of some other characters.
Yeah.
I'm so there for it.
I think, yeah, and I think it's important to remind people that like at the time we're recording this, so we're recording this on November 1st.
Yes.
So And this will come out because we still have other episodes of our first season coming out. So this is kind of bonus episode for our first season. So this is going to come out a couple of weeks after we have recorded it. So, but yeah, when we looked, it was still in the top 10, which means I'm hoping that like on that first day, it was hopefully up in the top 5 or whatever, because I feel like, and maybe it's just because the algorithm knows us so well. I just
Yeah.
felt like I am like constantly inundated with ads um for this audio series, and I'm loving it, and I don't care.
Yeah. Bring it on. I have no problem with that one.
Right. I want more. Like you said, I want more. And yeah, I have I am in a third listen at this point, and so they happened all so quickly. So I've been, listening to it like basically like once a week. And so yeah,
Essentially.
so essentially kind of like loses. I mean, you got to give it a little time to come back to it.
Agreed.
But I wanted to get some of the details right for this conversation. So that's why I went back and did a lot of listening to it. And sort of a deep dive into it.
Yeah, same for me. I wouldn't have necessarily done my third listen so quickly if I wasn't trying to prep for this and remember
Right.
some of the details. So yeah, I agree. I need time. I need a break, and then at some point I'm sure I'll go back and listen again, or it'll be interesting. Like, will I listen to favorite chapters the way you kind of, watch favorite episodes?
Oh, I love that. I do like that idea of like being like, and I think again, a great reason to break it into these sort of chapters or whatever,
Yeah.
into these episodes, because you could listen to
Yeah.
some of your favorite things. Um,
Any other overall impressions? I will say I thought, and I think it's a combination of writing, but I think a lot of it is the actors as well. I was
mhm,
incredibly impressed that they, for the most part, nailed the humor of the show. Like the quippiness was so there, so on point, and even
mhm,
like the new actors, particularly the actress playing Indira,
mhm.
she got that like sense of Buffy quippiness, Buffyverse quippiness, I should say. And that made me so happy. In some ways, I think I was probably most concerned about that because I think humor in general is always harder to nail. Yeah, harder to nail.
Mhm.
And, this is such a specific voice. So the fact that to me, in my view, it completely happened, I was thrilled.
So I will agree to that statement, and I will slightly kind of not disagree because I
Yeah.
think there's some great stuff about it. I think there's some really fantastic humor in this,
Yeah.
and like the banter works really well, and we get some of that. I think because you've got these two new writers who weren't originally writers on the show to begin with,
Yeah.
they have their own style of writing, they have their own
Yeah.
way of doing things, and I think it works though. What I do think is that they have sort of the echoes of those things in there that they want to like bring into it.
Hmm.
But they also, I think they were smart to do this like we're talking about alternate versions of
Yes.
these characters so that it doesn't have to be the same, so that if it's not quite the same as we hear on TV, that's okay because it's not the same versions of these characters. It is a
Right. Well, at
slightly
least half
altered
of them.
half of them. But I think with like, and because we like Spike feels very much right on point. I think they did a really good job with Spike. We knew so little about Clem
Yeah.
that great. Indira, fantastic. We don't
Yeah.
even know her. So like all the people who were in the like in the universe that we know, they could make everything up. So I think the
Yeah.
only person that they really had a ton of source to work with is Spike. And I think
And
they did
Giles.
and Giles, yeah. And I
Yeah.
think they did a really good job with both of them.
Yeah.
And creating and continuing the voice of both of those characters that felt authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and even so, even if things didn't feel quite the same with the characters from our universe, particularly Spike and Giles, because we did spend so much time with them. I mean, you can always be like, it's been 10 or 12 years. People
Hmm.
change. So, I mean,
Absolutely.
not that they're going to be like radically different, but that time difference I think was super smart. That really builds in um some wiggle room within the storytelling, within the character development, because there's this gap of time. We don't know what's happened to them. We don't know what they've gone through
Right.
in that time. So we don't know how they've been changed in that way.
Yeah, and we're always not going to get kind of like your humor can change a little bit. Things
Hmm.
you grow up, you get older. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't make nearly as many like, fart jokes as I did when I was, when I was 12 or when I was 20. Yes. I still love a good double entendre every now and
Oh,
then. I mean, I love that.
I
Um,
love that.
those are my favorites.
Same. I'm here. I'm here for it.
Some things never change, but and that's the thing that we get is that some things never change. And like
Right.
even across universes, like even across several universes, Cordelia still has some of that Cordelia swag about
Yeah.
her. But it's slightly different and it's slightly just like
Yeah.
changed a little bit. So I love that.
Yeah.
Whew. Um, what else? I mean, I just loved so much about the thing. I loved, I loved meeting new characters. I
Yeah.
loved the introduction of these new characters that I wanted to know more about and could see as like, if this was a series like as season regulars, like I could imagine like Miranda being like one of the big bads that keep coming back over and over again, had Clem not like eating her
Yeah.
eating her head off.
Yeah.
That would have been a good thing, but
Yeah.
here we are. That's
Yeah.
that's where we are. Um, just the idea of even some of the interesting like characters that they created and some of the interesting monsters that might not be that you could that you couldn't necessarily create or would be more difficult to express like in the form like television.
Mhm.
Like Buzz, when they're playing poker and you've got like Buzz, who is the embodiment of all the hummingbirds who have ever lived or died. It was just such a like
That one was the weirdest. I was
I
just like, as I've listened to it 3 times, and this is not a bad thing, but I'm like, that is the weirdest, most like almost philosophical creature ever created in the Buffyverse. And it's just so like out there. And I'm like, I'm not sure how I feel about it, but that's okay. I'm super intrigued by it.
And that's the thing that I liked about like that. So that again, so that's one of the things that I did like about it because you and I often talk about, and when we're talking about everything else in the regular series, that they went for the emotion and they went for like the emotion as opposed to the storytelling and the world building of that. And I
Yeah.
think this kind of does. I mean, I think they do a good job of hitting some of the emotional like high points, but it really takes its time and tells the story and really does a lot of world building, which I think is really, really great because then it gives you so much more to go on if you want to continue it, especially if you're going to continue it in this audiobook form.
So overall, how did the story work for you? What did you think of the story?
I, you know what? I liked it. I liked it. I wasn't quite sure where we were going with it. I wasn't quite
Hmm.
sure what was happening with it. But what I liked was again the usage of the characters. What I really liked was how they used the characters and how they referenced other characters throughout. So, okay. Cordelia coming to our reality to get Spike to help her defeat Drusilla in her reality. Great. The idea, I will say, I didn't hate it. It just took me a minute to kind of like get into the swing of it and to really
Hmm.
sort of understand all of it. Was sort of the Anya Anyanka stuff.
Hmm.
This idea that Anyanka now has a corporeal body that she has formed on her own and no longer needs a human host
Yeah.
to sort of to get through. Um, was something that I was like, okay, but it's fine, whatever. She's the first to do it. Great. This is like we're setting again, they spend a lot of time world building
Yeah.
all of these sort of new ideas. Um and basically and like this and when I was just listening to, because I was just listening to like part of episode 5, um, talking about the idea that like that seems to be the situation with all of the demons and vampires in this universe, is that they all sort of like vampires and demons all exist, not all of them, but like there are types of demons and vampires that exist on this like other ethereal plane, that then when a dead body becomes available, they can, swoop down in and consume that body. And that feels like what they were at least that's how I understood
Oh
what
yeah,
they were saying.
that's how I interpreted it. No, I agree. They're not saying all demons are that way, but they were saying for sure vengeance demons and for sure vampires. I mean, we kind of knew that about vampires. The vengeance demon aspect threw me, and I went back and forth on like liking it, not so much liking, not liking, as kind of wrapping my head around it. But in some ways it makes a lot of sense because you're like, Anya was human, then she did a bunch of spells that attracted to Hoffren and he elevated her to a demon. So how do you elevate someone to a demon who's not you know, already demon, that's is human and transitioning.
Hmm.
So as I wrap my head around it, I think overall I did like the concept that it's similar to like a vampire being made. I liked most the fact that they world build are
Hmm.
on that. Like I
Yeah.
like that they added to the world building, gave us some more details that, we're always sort of like we just pull out what we need in order to tell this specific story and then we like forget about it again. You're like, well, wait, now this universe is left with this fact. And then you may go down the road and do something completely different. You're like, wait, those are two completely contradicting elements of this universe. So I like that they did those. They started to make more concrete some of that world building. um yeah, and once I kind of started to wrap my head around it, um I was I liked the concept. It made sense.
Yeah, and I think when we start talking about this idea of like vengeance demons and all of this other stuff, and like because we see it with with Ood and
Oh yeah, odd.
Anya, Odd, and then later Anya and Cecily. We're assuming Cecily as Helfrich.
Agreed. I think the outstanding question in the universe is when was did she become a vengeance demon? Was
Right,
she
when did
one then, or after uh William is turned, does she
I
become a vengeance
I always
demon?
think that she became a vengeance demon after William was turned, that it was a little bit later, but it's hard to tell because she's hanging out with Anya during the Russian Revolution.
That's right. But that's
So
okay. That's
that
in the
might
early
work. That's
1900s.
the
So
early
it does
1900s.
work. Um,
So I like to think that it's after, but maybe not long after that um but like this idea that because he was like, oh, you will become a vengeance demon. Like that's the thing, is that it's a job offer. The way that they set it up in
yeah.
the universe is that it's a job offer. Hey, would you like to be this thing, this other being? And so this idea that they can merge together, that
Hmm.
it's not a possession, but it is a merger of this thing, that you can become something different,
Yeah.
does make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't, we just never had it before. And so hearing it explained was like, huh, does that make sense? I guess it does. I don't know, because we've never talked about it before. And now
Yeah.
we are. And now we're talking about what does that truly mean to be a vengeance demon? What does it truly mean to be a vampire, and filling in that space? And that's something that could have been done in the series, but
Yeah.
also I think is done nicely here. Yeah, so I really liked that. Um, you know, Anya having a dog and all of that is lovely. Jasper, we love Jasper. Um,
Oh my God. Yeah. That worked for me.
yeah,
More the way they did it. Like it just felt like there was a real dog there. That was really good.
yeah. Um,
I
s-
really liked, even though it was mostly talked about because they were separated for most of um the drama.
Mhm.
I liked that they made in the alternate world Tara and Anya best friends. It was such a
Yes.
callback to the moment in the Yoko Factor where
Hmm.
everyone is fighting and the two of them are in the bathroom doing thumb war and they're like, "Do you want to do thumb war?" Yeah, sure, okay. And they
Right.
like play thumb war and I was like, "Yes, that's." Because there was always like the potential for them to be friends as like the girlfriends, like because they were outside the main group. So I think it's great that they tapped into that more in this universe, even though in this universe they're not the girlfriends.
Right.
Um, I liked that. That was really good.
And that even Xander is barely a blip on the radar.
But
Uh,
interestingly, Jesse wasn't.
right,
Jesse
but
was part
Jesse,
of,
right.
or at least he was around and somebody that Cordelia had a crush on, and she was, you know, heartbroken when he was killed.
So, and this isn't because Anya says so during the prom, Anya says that the master kills her boyfriend and her best friend and her watcher at the prom, right? Is that what she says? She says that,
Oh
or the
gosh, she does say something, but I can't
I
remember.
know he kills the sister, he kills her
Right.
sister. I thought she said, I thought she said, I could be wrong. I'll need to go back and fact check. But I thought she said she kills her sister, her boyfriend, her best friend, and her watcher. I know she says best friend and watcher.
Yeah,
Uh,
you may be right.
so I'm
Well,
wondering if Jesse
no,
was her
not her
boyfriend.
watcher, because we know Drew, unless Drew was with the master at the time, Drew sired Giles.
Oh,
Because at
right.
the
That's
very
true.
end,
That's true.
when she unlocks him, he says, "You made me," or "You're my sire," or something like
Right.
that.
But that's the story that Anya knows. Like the story that Anya knows is that the master killed all of these people because Anya doesn't even know that the master may have killed Sarah, but it was Cordelia who had to slay her. And that's the part that nobody
Right,
knows, is
right,
that she got locked in a room and had to kill her own sister.
right.
So the story that she tells is the master killed them all because essentially he did, yes. Um, so I'm
Yeah,
wondering if
either way,
Jesse,
Harmony's dead, Jesse's dead. They think Giles is dead, and we
yeah,
know Sarah's dead.
right. And
Um,
yeah. And I
and we know
wonder if
Willow's
Jesse,
a part of the world. I mean, I thought Willow was not a part of the world. I thought maybe she either left early. I mean, I could see like her mom getting some sort of job and they like leave Sunnydale. But then we find out at the end, obviously she's being held prisoner. So Xander and Willow were part of that world, but they obviously, I would guess, are not friends with Jesse. That's the implication.
maybe.
But
Or
so
and
it's
there's no
interesting.
telling of what happened really where Willow's thing is because we just know that
Yeah.
she's a powerful witch who's been captured though.
Right. Right.
Um,
Um,
along with Amy and
yeah.
Ethan and Alphania.
Yeah.
Which actually was one was I really enjoyed that callback to Alphania.
I
Um
did too, but I was like, how did she end up in Sunnydale? That led
she
to so
was
many
in
questions.
London.
Yeah. Well, she was in Devon.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, she's part of the Devon Coven that Willow
yeah.
goes to be for her rehabilitation. So I love that. It was more, it's not a bad thing, but I'm like, question now. Like, how did this happen? Where did she come from? Blah, 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 blah.
What's
I mean,
going
I
on?
have so many questions coming out of,
Sure. And
which,
again, it's an alternate them being in an alternate reality, everything is like slightly different. Everything's a little bit, same people in different places and time. So
yeah, it's just more of that. Like, I'm like, now I want backstory filled in because we're like jumping in, 10, 12 years ahead of their storyline. So we don't know what's happened in their universe other than some of these key things that get revealed. Just like, now I have more questions. I mean, that's okay. And if there's more of the series, we might get some of those questions answered. Um, like the fact that how did Cordelia was not born in Sunnydale because she was, as far as we know, was born in Sunnydale in our universe, and then they moved there, and her parents got divorced, and her dad wasn't rich, and now she has a sister. I'm like, how did that all happen? What diverged between the two worlds? I have so many questions like that.
it's just the way it is.
Yeah, but I don't think, I mean, I think it's fair to ask these questions because it'd be one
Sure.
thing if it was like, we were in New York City and like really different lives. Like that'd be one thing, but like there's still enough similarity that you're like, so what were the little divergences? Like, did Buffy's parents not get divorced? Is that why she didn't move to Sunnydale, and then she wasn't called, or did she, you know, die in a car accident or like but it's the same for all of them. Like what are the little differences, because there is a lot of similarity. And
Right.
obviously like Spike was still made the same way, and we know Angelus exists, which means Darla exists. So like, and the Master exists. So like, what were I'm just the little differences are just making my mind like, ooh, what?
The,
So much potential.
the nerd brain is going all crazy.
It
Like
is.
I
It is.
want to know what's happening.
It is.
Um,
Oh, another really subtle callback that I thought was so good. I'm just seeing this pop up in my notes is when Clem and Giles are in the zoo and there are human hyena hybrids running around.
yes,
I was
yes,
like, oh
yes.
yes, that was awesome.
Hyena people.
I was like, that means that it happened, but they never got changed back. So I thought that was really cool that they
Yeah,
still existed. Yeah, it definitely felt like, and I don't know if I can't remember if they said this or not, if it's because of Spike and Drew kind of coming in and taking over and sticking more to a plan than Spike was prone to in our world, in our
right.
universe. But I was with Indira when she said that she pictured their Sunnydale to be like Escape from New York. That's totally what I was thinking. I mean, maybe, like it was much more demons run amok, almost
Come
like
on, come on, come on.
the Wishverse,
Sorry.
more Wishverse. And I think we're kind of
Yes.
we're more than Buffy Sunnydale, but not quite Wishverse level. It felt like in that universe. That's how I was seeing it. I don't know about you, because the fact that like the vampire was out there like busking, and because playing the guitar was a
Oh
way to lure
yeah.
people in, like you
Right.
didn't see that in our Sunnydale. So I liked those like subtle differences.
Yeah. I thought again, it was a really good. There was some really nice nods to all of those things. Oh, so the one of the other things too that I really sort of found interesting, compelling, but
Mhm.
also sort of like, how do I feel about this? I don't really
Mhm.
know, but I like it, but maybe I don't. Is Tara, is all of the stuff with her. And I think it was a little bit jarring to me at first with the switch when it was like evil Tara, when it's Witch Queen Tara, and then it turns into when she turns and she's fighting her inner self into um, you know, original recipe Terra. Those like those were the things that we really kind of like where it kind of took threw me for a loop for a minute.
Sure.
But I got used to it, and I think it was just more of a again an understanding of what was truly happening. And I think
Hmm.
it becomes clearer as the story goes on that this is again more, this is not necessarily like, Amy says it's not, a multiple personality situation. This is like a true like invasion. Like there's multiple people living in this one body trying to
Right.
squeeze out the other one. Which again is like this interesting this interesting concept and idea to like think about what that would look like on screen and how you would
Hmm.
portray that on screen. But I think
In some
Amber
ways, I
Benson,
think it would be a little easier.
yeah, yeah.
I think that having visual cues would make that an easier story to tell.
I kind of almost pictured it like Gloria and Ben, kind of like I sort of pictured it doing this sort of like back and forth where it was like this sort of visual of like it's Tara, no, it's Queen of, which I thought was really interesting because I think there were a lot of like callbacks to Tara season 5 and this like Ben Glory sort of idea of like these multiple entities existing and sharing one body, fighting control for this body and brain sucking and chain and like driving witches crazy by sucking out the magic out of them and then sending Ethan Rain out into the streets drained of his power, walking around without knowing what's going on, being all crazy and not knowing his name and all that stuff. I just thought there were a lot of great like parallels between what she went through in season 5 and what this Tara is doing to other people.
Yeah. Well, I didn't actually ever see that. But you make a good point. There is that comparison for that. Yeah, I see that now. One of the things I thought they did really well is um putting doubt about whether Spike was turning back to evil, both in the beginning when
Hmm.
we first started, because we weren't sure what was going on until you realize, like, no, he's just working undercover. And then when they go to the alternate world and he connects with Drusilla, it was like most of the time I was like, no, he fought too hard. He worked too hard to get there in his soul. And I was like, but I was like, oh, I'm not sure. I mean, I definitely like put doubt in my mind, and I thought it was done very effectively.
For sure. I mean, there was definitely a moment where I was
Hmm.
like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Have we really gone through all of this just for him to be like, you know what? No, I want the power back. I want the power back. I was like, are you kidding? I was like, man. So the payoff for all of that was fantastic. I thought it was such a great payoff. I think the callback to like the Gem of Amara was so smart.
Yes.
I thought that was such a brilliant little like, let's toss that in there.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
I-
Yeah, I agree. The payoff was, and the way James Marsters played it was so perfect. Like the vocal, the way his vocals switched, and you felt like our Spike was back. And as
mhm.
much as he cared for Drusilla, he was not going to give up what he had fought so long for.
Yeah,
Or
he's
I
got
should
that
say, fought
soul.
so hard for, and has been, um, kept the fight going these last 10, 12 years. I love that aspect of the story.
Yeah. I just like so things that really I think also the like this idea like of Kurgan's grimoire, like this whole, this being the thing and like Tara being sort of the big bad, or Kurgan really being the big bad that they kind of have
Hmm.
to fight. Um, I thought that was a really interesting uh, plot point for me. This idea of the sunlight spell and all of that stuff, and even Tara's conversion, like how she became
Hmm.
evil was really, I think, is really nice because unlike Willow, where Willow was just like doing too much, I mean, granted, her change came out of grief, but we see a lot more of that before, and maybe in this other universe we see maybe glimpses of that in this world's Tara. Um, but like the idea that she was like, I was trying to do something good. Like
Hmm.
I heard that there was a spell that could make the moonlight like sunlight, and so I have to try because because they're so powerful. And so if I can
Hmm.
make it happen, um then great. I which I think is a totally viable like plot point for Tara to be like trying to do something good and it backfires and it didn't work the way that we want. But I also think that the conversation that she has with Amy in the cell, not played by the original actress, by the way,
Right.
um, she's the one who didn't come back. Of the people that they mentioned from before, but like the idea that she's so um the fact that Amy is so hard on her about that choice felt a little like unnecessary. But then again, it's like one of those things, hindsight is 2020, but it was like she was like, well, I
Yeah.
would have done more research about it. And it was like, but if you're in a desperate time, then why
Yeah.
wouldn't you? And like she says, it only takes like one day of stupid to mess up your entire life.
Yeah. I mean, the show is certainly known for people just at times jumping in feet first without having all the information. So that's not like out of line of how the show has told stories or characters have behaved.
Hmm.
That being said, I think that was the story that worked the least for me.
Mm,
I, and for me, it was because Tara. never had that in her. And so if we're going to see her have that in her, I need to see the like lead up to it. And I feel like we were just being told and I wanted to be shown to buy into it.
Of like her.
Of Tara, of this Tara that had, a little bit of sort of that willowness in her, and that
Mhm,
she um was a little more driven for the magic and the power. I'm not saying she's the same as Willow,
mhm.
but and that she had the potential in her for that evil to take over. To me, Tara was so about the white magic, and that was one of her strengths. Um, and this Tara seems like a stronger Tara because she's the one, as we learn, that taught Anya after Anya was stripped of being Anyanka.
Right.
And so, she obviously is a stronger person. So that being said, I just needed more. Like I felt we jumped into it and we didn't get to see how we got there, and I didn't quite buy into it. That's just
Right.
how it worked for me.
Yeah.
That was the least successful. That and the Drew Tara relationship
Mm.
also didn't quite work for me. I mean, maybe it wasn't supposed to. I could see that being part of it too. I do feel like, and this is where I think I almost wish the whole thing about her Kurgan being more in control of Tara had come out sooner, and he was like there more, because it just felt to me a little bit like Tara got possessed and now she's kind of forced to be in this romantic relationship. I know at the end she says, well, I guess it started off me feeling bad for her. And yeah, I did start to feel for her. But then she even says, did I actually feel for Drusilla? So
Mhm.
I know they weren't meaning it that way, but it just felt a little icky. It felt again like Tara's not in control of her romantic sexual decisions.
Mhm.
Um, and so it was hard for me to think much of that relationship. It just felt like another um I can't think of the word. It felt like a loss of agency, another loss of agency
Sure.
for
For
Tara.
Tara. Yeah.
It would have been more interesting if they just had them working together but not romantically involved. I mean, I get that part of that was to divide Tara and Drew, but I still think if you brought if you brought Spike back, just him being there would distract Drusilla, whether Tara and Drusilla were together. Like I didn't think that element needed to be there.
Mhm.
And it could still divide them. Spike could still have Drew's ear, and like Tara and Drew had a partnership, even if it wasn't romantic. I mean, I think it still would work without the romantic part. So those were the two things that probably like worked the least for me.
Mm.
Um,
No, I can see that point. I
yeah.
think like for me the whole idea was I never thought of it as Tara being sort of like power hungry or anything. I felt that like Tara and Anya and Cordy are all fighting together, or like the Scoobies in this universe, and trying to like stop Drew and Spike from taking over Sunnydale and doing all this other stuff. And so this rumor gets so they like Spike and Drew start this rumor about the grimoire to get Tara to use it so that she becomes possessed by the spirit of Gergen. So I feel like the decision was more out of desperation than it was out of like a power grab. It was, we need a way to stop them, and we don't, and like this could be it. And if this is it, we need to shoot our shot. And whether someone was like, hey, let's hold off and think about this more or not is undetermined. So in that sense, yeah, I would have liked to have like some more information about like what was that like? What was that sort of journey and decision like for her? I agree, like in terms of like her and Drew being together, like the actresses together, loved it. I thought like I liked the interaction between them. I mean, Tara, Tara, the sexual relationship for me it was fine. It was, and I liked it. I mean, I didn't hate it. It For me, it felt more like we're here together because we're evil together, and that
Mhm.
just means that we're just playing around and having a good time, doing evil things together, plotting and scheming. And well, since we're here, and you're a lesbian and I'm a vampire without a soul, we're both feeling a little evil. Let's just have a little let's just have some fun, which makes sense. I mean, it makes sense for something like that to happen between those two people in that situation. And does Tara ever truly love her? I don't think so. I mean, I don't think it's ever truly love. I think it was, the evil and the possession of Kurgan and all of that stuff that was sort of allowing that to happen, which to your point does take away some of her agency and what she's and who she is with and what she is doing. Because even the like Tara, the original recipe Tara inside is like trying to inform decisions about like don't kill Cordy and Anya. Like, you don't kill these people. Don't do so. She's at least able to have some agency over those things, but everything else is getting pushed aside for her. And I don't know if she had full control of her faculties. Would Tara actually be with Drusilla now?
Yeah, except they kept talking about love and relationship and my love and blah blah blah. So I do think it's more than just having fun and having sex. I'd actually be okay with that. It was like two evil people were just like Drew's, lost her the love of her life, and Tara's like, "Oh, I have no inhibitions. Let's get together, let's hook up." I'd be fine with that. But to me, they were trying to like have a relationship, and I just didn't feel it. And then to me, the additional part of lack of agency just made it creepier.
Mhm.
Um, but back to the point too about how Tara let herself get caught up in this. I don't think she was power hungry, but she does say at some point, I think when she's turned back to Tara and she's talking with Anya, that she realizes she must have that something like a darkness in her that she didn't think she had. And that's where I want more backstory because I have a hard time buying that. Not that Tara didn't make mistakes in our universe, because obviously, like when she was afraid she was going to turn into a demon because the story she was told by her family, and she does that spell that makes them unable to see demons. That's obviously a mistake, but it's not a power hungry mistake. It's not like darkness intent mistake. So I just don't see that aspect to Tara. And I'm not saying that this alternative universe Tara was like had that real deep in her, but they kind of talk about it. So it for me, it just didn't work for me. I get everything that you're saying, but that whole aspect, and I found evil Terror kind of boring, honestly. Like I didn't
Mm,
think she was wicked enough. That's why like I wish Kurgan was there more. And made her actually like the slow transition was actually kind of boring. I would have
mhm,
like made her the transition part would have been fine, but I would have made her darker and then like these rare moments pop out.
mhm.
I just felt that was a little talky to me and not
Uh-huh.
so like I said, a lot more telling rather than showing.
Right. There's a lot of pacing issues, I think, with that, and
Yes.
just trying to keep it moving, and
Yeah.
going on. But again, I will agree. I think there was a lot of extra exposition of things that
Yeah.
happened that could have been cut out. Like, there could have been like new information or new stuff that could have come out, or more backstory that could have been filled in instead of some of the like similar exposition. And I wonder if that's based on like I wonder if that's one of those like production things that they were that of the it's written this way because of how we're producing the work.
Yeah, it
I
could
don't
be.
know. I don't know if that's the case or not, because there were lots of times where I felt like they were repeating the same things over and over and over again. And I was like,
Agree.
yeah, you just said that. But I
Yes.
think the repeating is, and I think maybe I'm repeating it because we're doing it in this because we're in a very specific style of something. And
Yeah.
so the need for the repetition is important in case you missed it the first time. I don't know. Um,
Could
that's
be. Like I said, you've listened to more of these kind of audio dramas, the recent ones, than I have. So I don't know, what's typical of this style.
well, and that's the thing is that because in the ones that I have listened to, I don't remember getting as much of that kind of repetition and all of that stuff as I have in this one.
Hmm.
I felt like I got a lot more like exposition-y talk
Hmm.
of what just happened over and over again in this than I have in other things. So I think they could have gotten more story into it, or even more backstory into it. I wouldn't have mind more backstory for sure,
Yeah.
to fill in some of those gaps or to answer some of those questions that we have.
Yeah.
Um,
So
Shout out to Mr. Pickles, by the way.
I go back and forth on Mr. Pickles, on
Um,
whether I like him or not. I do think it's interesting they bring in familiars, because that's certainly nothing that has been brought into the show.
mhm,
Well, the Buffyverse, because it wasn't even in Angel either, where a witch has a familiar. It's certainly common in other
right.
tales about witches and witchcraft, having a familiar.
Well, didn't Amy have one or Amy's mom have one? I mean, they had a cat
Well, they had a
and
cat, and I don't think they ever said that was the familiar. Um, I
um
don't mind that they brought in that she had a familiar. I'm going
yeah,
back and forth on whether Mr. Pickles worked.
I mean it was again like Mr. Pickles is like a total plot device. I mean, it's lovely,
Yeah,
but
I
it's a
have to
total
say,
plot device to get that exposition of the stuff happening in her head out of her head without it being like, you know,
yeah, no, I was going to say I'd rather have that than her just monologuing all the time. So
yeah,
that way it does work. Yeah, I agree.
yeah. Um
Uh,
I'd like to
so
give some shout outs to Olivia. Shout outs to
yes, oh my God,
Olivia.
Olivia, and then she and Giles got married.
Love that.
That made me super happy.
Loved everything about that. Shout out to Ethan Rain.
Yeah, that was
Shout
a
out to
nice.
Ethan Rain. Um, I really enjoyed that. Um, and shout out to Ghost Jonathan.
Oh my God, that's right. Ghost Jonathan was so on point. That was so Jonathan.
He was like he felt like really nice and like back into it
Yes.
as well. He was like Jonathan from high school, Jonathan.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well,
um
now I want to know what he did to get or Anyanka pissed off,
no, it was
whichever
Anya. It
was
was Witch
Anya.
yeah, it
Sorry.
was Witch
Was
Anya
with
that
That's right. It
yeah,
was
Witch
Witch
Anya
Anya.
who Witchy Anya. Um
Um, what
yeah,
he did to piss her off, that she cursed him to be trapped in the cemetery.
right.
Oh my
As
God.
it
And the
goes.
fact that he would be like, ooh, and Cordelia was like, do you have to do that every time?
Ooh, I'm scaring you. Like, because that's just what he thinks a ghost would do. Um,
Exactly.
oh my gosh.
I really loved the bonding between Cordelia and Indira, and particularly that like final sequence
Hmm.
um in the last episode where um Indira talks about why she wants to stay, and she makes Cordy cry, and Cordy gives her a hug. And
Oh
but
yeah.
also like when they were training before the big battle,
Hmm.
and the back and forth advice to each other, I think it was really great that they each had something to learn from each other as the new Slayer and the very experienced Slayer.
Yeah. I
That
really liked that.
that was probably those moments were probably I felt the most well, one set of moments I felt the most emotionally. The other set was how Spike was with Drusilla. When he
Yeah. When
like
they're
you
trapped
really
in the
felt
bubble.
like that relationship, even though he
Yeah.
knew he was not going to go back to her, he couldn't, that he'd have to take her out in the end, and he was willing to do that. Um, it was so beautifully played. I think those were the two best emotional arc stories.
Yeah, I would agree. Like the emotional stuff between Cordelia and Indira is beautiful.
Hmm.
Um I really liked that. And Spike and Drusilla, yes, totally works. I mean, I mean, again, it's like it's old Spike and Drusilla and like the two of them trying to take over the world. It's season two all over again, and
Hmm.
um it just feels right. Um and then I guess like when you know that he's actually not going to betray us and do all this other stuff, it makes everything else that he does so much more impactful. And
Yeah.
even when they're in the bubble, when she casts a spell and puts them in that bubble, and it's just the two of them
Hmm.
together talking about that, and he's like, I'm so sorry, but it was so great to see. Like, it's truly like the breakup of, you know, that's your dating antichrist. Like, that's the one who you cannot like get rid of. Like,
Well,
that's
and
your first love, man. You never forget your first love.
yeah. Well, technically second if you want to count
Well,
Cecily.
second, if you're not count, well, third, if you want to count as mom. I mean,
True. I mean, but to be fair, there was no weirdness in that. I mean, that was just he was a
not
mama's boy.
not
Well,
until she turned him, and then she was like,
yeah, but
"You
as
want to
we
get back up in here?" Then she made it weird. Then
well,
she
I think
just
that's
made
more
it
the
weird.
demon made it weird. I feel like his mom completely left the body and it was only the
Right.
demon that took over. But anyway, to get back to Spike and Drusilla, I think also it was a beautiful moment of closure for Spike to sort of get his um take back some of what Drusilla took from him by cheating all the time, by putting Angelus first. Um, so I thought that was a nice moment of kind of closure and maybe resolving some unresolved issues for him. Not that he talks about it, but just knowing what we know from his time on the show.
Yeah. Oh, some of the other things that I really enjoyed, and just kind of going back to sort of quotes and things like that. Uh, the the Spike and Cordy relationship, I really liked that. I liked the fact that after they fight at the hospital, he kind of hits on her and he's like, "So, are you seeing anybody back in your university torture triangle?" And she's like, "Are you kidding me? Are you hitting on me right now? Is this actually happening?" He's like,
Yeah,
"Yes, I actually find you attractive right now." And then she says, and again, great quote, and I feel like this is so on brand for Cordy, especially in a Cordy of this universe. Being beautiful isn't my goal. I just have good genes.
yeah,
Thank you. Stop making it like I'm trying to be beautiful for you.
yeah,
That's just who I am. I can't do anything about any of that. So leave it alone, buddy. I had to throw my gauntlet down. Well, pick it up and put it back where you got it.
yeah, yeah. They definitely had really good chemistry.
Yeah.
At first when I heard that, I loved it. And then I think by the third time I heard it, I liked it a little less, not because it wasn't awesome. Like it was an awesome moment and the chemistry was there. But then I started to feel like a little too much. It was like, oh, you put a hot woman who like has superpowers or who can like stand her ground and like Spike is into her because there's like Indira teases him for being into Miranda, and then there's the Cordy thing, and I just felt like that actually wasn't fully true to character. I mean, maybe that's true now, but it wasn't like he was hitting up all the Slayers he'd fought before. Buffy is the like was the special one. I it's not that I don't think Cordy and Spike would have a little bit of flirtation. I don't know, it just felt heavier to me. And I may be like overthinking it because there certainly was that moment in the episode where he went to take, I believe it was the one he went to take back the gem from Angel, and he is in the garage, and Cordy and Doyle and Angel are coming out, and he's like, "Oh, Cordelia, you look good. You lose some weight," and she's like, "Yeah, I've been working out." But there wasn't as much heaviness in it. It was kind of just like
Sure.
a light flirty, which, and if maybe that moment in the audio drama had been it, I'd be okay. But I feel like they kept it going.
Well, yeah, and there was
You know,
definitely this idea of like, oh, he's gonna like, kind of play it like I don't know, like I don't think it should happen. I don't think that Cordy and Spike
no,
should get together at all.
and I
Um,
wasn't worried about that. I don't feel like that was in any way implied that that might happen.
right. Um, I mean, I don't mind him hitting on her. Like that feels, I mean, to me that kind of feels par for the course for Spike. Not not even just because she's a slayer, but more so that she is a strong, powerful woman. And I think that's the thing that because even with Faith, I mean,
Oh, that's true.
even
I
with
forgot
Faith,
about
there's,
that.
I mean, Faith kind of does a little, she's doing it, Faith does all of this stuff to Spike when she does the body swap. She does all of that stuff for like, for the laugh and for the like doing all that stuff. But when they're in the basement together and they're having that conversation, I think Faith is a little bit different because like that conversation was like felt like two pals talking together, and it was
Mm,
like she was like, yeah, I can hold my own with you, so I'm not even worried about what you think you might be
yeah.
able to do with me, because it's all the same. It's all, naughty nurses and schoolgirls and bullwhips, and I know your number, so I'm not even worried about you. And so, but I think with this whole thing, I just think I think Spike is just attracted to strong, confident, powerful women. I think that's his type. And so, because he really doesn't do anything with Cordelia until she like really kicks some ass, and he's like, "Oh, okay." Ooh, that reminds me of a little bit of the time when we were out on patrol. Like, I think he was like, you happen to be very attractive right now because you were incredibly strong and confident, and powerful in that moment. And that made me attracted to you. So I figured I might as well ask and see.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I just can't. I go back and forth on whether I liked it. I guess part of me is at first I was like, oh, cute, but like the more I listened, the more I like kind of got annoyed with it. More so too because of everyone like saying Spike was that way and like making fun of him. And it kind of felt like it took away from the journey he went on in falling for Buffy, and that it was that very specific sequence of events that took him on his emotional arc and then got his soul. So it just felt like it was, and I don't think that was the intention at all. It's more how I'm feeling about it. It just felt like it took away from that a little bit, even though like the series overall does a very good job of recognizing his journey, and Indira, is certainly his cheerleader for what he's done. So that was all for me. That was just
Yeah.
kind of how I was feeling about it.
Yeah. How did you feel about how the story sort of wrapped itself up? Like how, like, sort of the resolution of, you know, getting rid of Kurgan and all of that stuff, and
Um,
Indira having to do the
yeah,
spell.
actually it had very season 6 finale vibes to me.
Mm.
Taking place in the magic box, evil witch,
Hmm.
Giles getting severely hurt, and then him like telling Anya what the solution was. And in the,
Hmm.
before in season 6, it was Xander, and but here it was Indira. And so I that's not a bad thing. I kind of liked the parallels.
Hmm.
I thought it was fine. I thought it was very within the Buffyverse. Um, yeah, it's for me it worked. How about you?
Yeah, I had the same thought about it. It was very like season 6,
Hmm.
fighting in the magic box, like my fireball kicked your thing's ass, and like,
Yeah.
this whole thing going on, and it's like Sander is the key or whatever, and Tira is the key, and like it's
Yeah.
no, Dawn is the key. We all know that Dawn is the key.
Well,
Um,
if you think about it, even though Indira is a Slayer, I mean, she's a newbie, so in some ways, she's also like Xander in that she may have the power, she doesn't have the experience.
right.
It took like an act of giving yourself, which is
Hmm.
what Xander did. I mean, he was willing to sacrifice his life in order to talk his best friend down.
Right.
And so, not that the way Indira bled was going to take her life, but it was still a giving of
Hmm.
essence of life. So yeah.
So they say something that's really interesting that I don't necessarily agree with,
Okay.
in this, and or maybe I don't know. You tell me.
Okay.
So Giles says something about Indira. He, he says that like, because they're talking about she needs to bleed into the book and all this other stuff, and it's
Yeah.
like, and he's like, and it's her innocence
Right.
that makes her, and he's like, and I think that's one of the reasons why she is chosen. And I think that's one of the reason why he basically alludes to the fact that, like, because there's this sort of, this innocence or this whatever that she has in her is part of the reason why. Um, I wish I had have the exact thing of why she was chosen, and that, like, that's why all those girls are chosen.
Right.
Um,
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know if I don't know if I believe that or not. I don't know if that's something that I hold true, because I don't know if I can necessarily. It's hard to tell because we haven't like, I don't have a lot of,
We don't have enough Slayers to like
yeah,
compare to.
to compare to. But like
And
if I'm looking at Faith, like I don't maybe she did and that quickly got taken away from her and all
yeah,
of her
I
stuff.
think innocence is is the wrong word. I think what they were going for, I get. It's more like an inner strength and inner, you know, it's like an inner moral compass. Doesn't mean that that moral compass can't get, veer off the path. I could see that being more, but yeah, I wasn't in love with that either. Um, I mean, I think it is interesting they try to answer the question
Yeah.
of how are these slayers chosen, but based on the ones we know, I just think I don't know that that shows up yet. I mean, if you think about all the potentials we got to know,
Hmm.
that had more of a backstory. Um, I guess in some ways, to me, what they were trying to get is at the end of the day, they'll step up.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess
it
so.
it
Yeah.
it, it may take a while to get there because when you think about it, it took Faith a while to get there, but
Hmm.
Faith put herself in jail when she could break out at any time. So,
Right.
she stepped up in the end.
But even
It,
the, I mean, even before that, like uh, there's not a lot to tell us of like what Faith's like childhood was like,
right, but we
you
obviously
know.
get the sense it was terrible and nobody did
Sure.
anything to help her. So, if she'd gotten the help she needed, I don't think she would have fallen down the path that she did.
So I just wonder, like, is it like, it feels like based on what we get, I mean,
Right.
for the most part, it feels like really the major criteria for being a slayer is that your life is real fucked up before you become a slayer. So that, because we know you can handle some difficult stuff, and
Yeah.
then because life is about to get even more difficult for you, because that seems to be everyone's story, is that
Except
there's
it's not
something.
Kennedy's story. I mean, other than if you consider her the poor little rich girl, but like she obviously comes from a very wealthy family.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be that I think it sounds like she was probably raised by nannies, so she doesn't necessarily have the love of like parents, who just kind of treat her as, a requirement to have
Right.
heirs. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's that.
I mean, because it happens in, it happens in Frey, it happens with
True.
with even with Buffy to some extent. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know. So I that one I was a little like, whatever, but I get it. We're
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So let's
I
keep
appreciate
going.
the attempt anyway.
Yes, yes. The attempt of like, how are people chosen?
Right.
Um, but
Right.
there's, and she's saying there are hundreds, maybe even thousands activated, like, probably every year, because it seems like sometime around that age, 14, 15, whatever, they link it to that sort of the time of when you might get your cycle or whatever, like
Right.
that's
Right.
around the time that you become activated, so that there are hundreds of thousands getting activated every year.
Yeah.
um
Of course, then the show implied in the way they did the montage and Chosen, there were girls younger, um, potentially.
well, the girl playing
I guess the
baseball
baseball. Yeah,
was
it's
the
hard to tell
youngest one, but
what
there's no
age she
telling.
was.
She was playing
Yeah.
softball, so I mean,
Yeah.
she could have been like 10 or I mean, she could have been 11 or 12. She could
Oh,
have been 13. She might have
she
just been
didn't
a
look,
small.
yeah, she didn't look that old to me. She was more like, yeah, maybe 10, but it's hard to tell. So
Yeah.
we don't have that laid out. So, what were some of your favorite parts, moments, aspects of the story? all the things.
The music. I
Yeah.
loved this sort of like idea of like Spike's. I like I have all these like very theatrical ideas behind it all, and so, and so like one of the things that I really love is just this idea of like Spike sitting almost in in Caritas, like in a situation like that, and he's like sitting on a stool with a curtain behind him, with a spotlight, smoking a cigarette, and being like, "So, this is what happened," and it's like this jazzy blues number. Um, I
I love it.
choreographed a whole like modern dance piece behind him. That was just me. I just had this like great idea of him being like sitting on the cigarette and like talking to an audience full of like demons and telling them what's going on. I just like that idea just felt so rich and wonderful and was such a great previously on
Yeah.
sort of situation for each episode. And that music was just so like so right. It was so like noir for me. It
Yeah.
had that sense of that. So I really liked that. Um there were some great quotes in there too. There were some really lovely
Oh my
uh
God. I was like, as I was taking notes and listening to all the episodes, I definitely wrote down some like quippy lines. There were so many good ones.
yeah. Um uh, I,
I'm scrolling through my notes. One of them was when Spike told Clem that he's the new Giles
oh yeah.
because he got knocked out. I was like, yeah.
You've got you've got knocked out once
I know.
and you're out for the rest of the fight.
Exactly.
Um
And then Cordelia said to Indira at some point, "You're a spunky little Muppet." I like that.
I love
Oh my
that
God,
one.
that was
I
so
love that.
Cordelia.
You're a spunky little Muppet, aren't you?
That was
Um
awesome.
but another one was like let's see. When they're talking about Spike, they're at the poker game, and she's like, he's a dead thing with a dead heart, and dead things can't love. I just like there was something about that that was like, man, that's harsh.
It's way harsh.
That's way harsh because his whole thing, and of course he takes offense to it because like his whole
Yeah.
thing is that he is a lover and a fighter, but like he works so hard to he has loved so hard in whatever way is possible. And so for someone to be like, you are dead, your heart is dead, and and for that reason alone, you are not allowed to love. But then later on, he tells Jonathan in the graveyard, he says, I've been thinking, making impossible things possible for thousands of years. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yes, you have, Spike. Thank you. Fuck y'all.
Yes. Yes,
He's been
exactly.
doing it the most. I mean, yeah. Um, So we talked about, I thought this was interesting, whether it was intentional or not. I loved it because we talked about how Buffy was the first TV show to use Google,
Uh-huh.
in their thing. And Anya talks about doing her spell to look through the different universes as like looking at Google Street Map.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I
Good
was
point.
like, I don't know if that was intentional, but I like it, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna pretend like they did that on purpose.
I know. I like that.
How about you?
I
Because I have so many.
Yeah, oh, I do too. I have a very long list of likes. I think first and foremost, I love Indira. I mean, this is such a hard world to introduce a new character to, and then she's a new Slayer. And what I thought was so smart that they did, and in a way that 100% worked, is that she was like already caught up to speed on the storyline. We didn't have to do a lot of exposition because she was deep in the subreddits. She knew about Slayer. So obviously, like when the spell was done, at some point that started to trickle out. Whether the whole world actually fully knows or it's more like more people know, but it's still like somewhat, underground. I just love that. I love that, like the reasoning why she has martial arts training, so she can already like jump in. She just now has like the strength to match. I thought that was awesome. Her backstory made so much sense. I just lived everything about it. And you could tell when I was listening to her, I was like, she's so good at acting in this medium that had to, of course, look up the actress in IMDb. And one of her biggest roles has been, and you kind of only know this if you are connected to toddlers in your life, and I have that through nieces and nephew, but she was the voice of Doc McStuffin, which is like a really well known,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
you
So I was
know
like,
that.
oh, no wonder she's so good at this. And she's done other voice work, but like that was one of her big roles. And I was like, well, no wonder she's so good at this. Um,
Oh.
she really could act with her voice. And the same with James Marsters, because he's done books on tape.
Hmm.
He's done that Dresden series. Not that I've ever listened to him. Now I kind of want to go back and like
Is
actually
that the
listen to him
Dresden
do them.
Files? Is that what
Yeah, I think that's
that
what it is.
is?
The
Okay.
Dresden Files. Yeah. He was excellent. I thought Charisma was excellent. To me, and Clem, those four were like
Hmm.
some of the best voice acting for the entire series.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I loved Indira. I thought again, such a hard role to like step into and to
Yes.
be, but also the idea of like introducing, this Slayer who just got their powers that
Yes.
morning, literally over breakfast, was like, oh my God, what happened?
I know.
He says Wheaties, but that feels like very generic. But I like
Yeah.
want to know what that scene looks like where she's like eating breakfast and all of a sudden this like wave and rush of strength just washes over that she likens to like getting your period for the first time, except it's way more bloody because
That was awesome.
with the killing and the blood and the guts. So,
it Whether it was intentional or not, it was also a nice callback to the movie where
yes,
in the movie she had cramps and that's how she would know the
and
vampire
that's
was there.
yes,
Um, which I am glad they cut that out when they did the show.
yes,
But
that felt
whether
a
it's
little bit
intentional or
much.
not, it was a good connection to that.
Yeah, and I loved how like just her vocal flexibility of stuff
Yeah.
where she found humor in her like and the use of her voice and how she,
Yeah.
I just really liked it. She gave her character so much texture for me.
Yes. The other thing I loved was, and this is where I'm kind of inferring um, the intention behind this part of Indira's story, the fact that she knew so much about slaying, so that when she ended up being activated, she was so excited. And she also knew going into it, she was going to be part of a sisterhood. To me, that just shows what Buffy's done. Like,
Mm-hmm.
of course, there's going to be consequences from that spell, but it shows like how different the lives of Slayers are. And there's an embrace and excitement versus thinking about like when Buffy was called and it was all it was is a burden. And you really see that in the Cordelia in this series, that the heaviness, the burden of being a solo slayer,
Mm-hmm.
and how that is 100% changed. And granted, we haven't met other slayers yet. I'm sure some of them feel the burden, but I just loved that dynamic in showing what is different in the main universe
Right.
with the spell activating all the slayers.
Well, and again, if we're going back to sort of the comics, one of the things that I do remember about the comics is that this idea that what Buffy has done by activating all of the Slayers and what she chooses to do when she like reinstates the council or reforms the council to
Right.
be, she creates an army
Right.
is what she does, is that she creates an army of women who are able to fight and take down the forces of evil. And so, like, the Watchers are no longer like one Watcher, one girl. It's like
Right.
a one Watcher over, like, I'm the Watcher of, Scotland, or I have a territory that I have to like, that
Right.
I'm like helping to support the women in this territory. And so much so that, again, spoiler alert, that like there is a big bad in the comics that tries to stop Buffy because they think that she's gained too much power, and then like surprise, it's Angel and all that other nonsense. But because Angel doesn't agree with what she's done now, which again doesn't whatever. Um, sorry,
That's a whole nother podcast
that is a whole
episode.
nother podcast for a whole nother time. It's kind of ridiculous. Um, But what? Okay, that's so much better. What? I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
We were talking about Indira and
Oh,
being part of
yes.
sisterhood.
Yes, her being a part of sisterhood and her being like this idea that she was like I know all about everything, which again, yes, I loved that. Like that she already knew because when she meets Spike for the first time, she's like, "Wait, you mean Spike like Summers
Summers,
Rosenberg's
Rosenberg, and
Giles
Giles.
Spike? Like that one? Oh my God, I already know everything about you." And we're like, "Great, because so do we, and we do not have time for a recap."
I
We
know.
need to move this story along. Um,
Yeah. I thought she was also like in those moments, like the voice of us, the fans too, which I
yes,
loved. That was really like
yeah,
just a cool moment.
yeah, and she even brought up some like even she brings up some really really interesting things. When she talks to Giles and she's like, "So, when you were a kid and you were like into dark magic and probably drugs and stuff, and you didn't want anything to do with the Watchers Council, and then you became a Watcher, and then Buffy's Watcher became like brutally murdered, and then they sent her to you. What's that about?"
And then they made you be Faith and Buffy's watcher, and Faith
Watcher,
was out of control, and her watcher had been killed by a demon.
no.
What I'm wondering now is because I know so many of them go to the conventions. I wonder if these are like fan theories they've heard over the years, and they were like
I,
incorporating them because that's
that would be amazing.
it feels like it, but I mean that in a good way.
That would be amazing because it is such a weird thing, and I never once thought about
Nope.
those questions about like, why was Giles specifically like the one, you know, chosen for that. But then we see in the other alternate reality that Giles is also Cordelia's watcher.
Oh yeah,
So he was meant to be in Sunnydale, like, you know,
but apparently Buffy wasn't.
not necessarily, not
Yeah,
necessarily. Buffy who?
right.
That's what we're saying in this one. Buffy who? I don't know how many times she was like, I do not know who this Buffy chick is.
Exactly.
Um,
So we kind of already talked about it earlier, but I still want to give Clem all the love. Oh my God, I love Clem so much. I love his story. I love everything about him. I'm like, give me more, give me more, give me more.
I just feel like there needs to be like a round of applause, like thunderous rounds of applause for Clem.
Yes.
Excuse me, Clement, because when he
When
wants
I'm
to be
feeling fancy.
fancy.
That was awesome. Oh my God. So awesome.
Yeah, I just adored him, and I loved that they again like kept true to what was happening because everything
Yeah.
that he did, like and to give him this like tragic backstory, really, of like that he's in pain all the time, and that here's a demon who's in constant pain 24/7 and does not know what life is like without pain, but chooses to be happy despite the like copious amounts of like unforgiving pain that he exists in. That is such an inspiring thing to think about. Like that is such an amazing thing to think about that we can that being happy can be a choice for some of us.
Mm-hmm.
Like even though we exist in pain and we exist in trauma and tragedy, we can still choose to be happy. We can find a happiness in a grape soda. We can like spending time with our friends, playing poker, and even though we're not eating kittens anymore, we're still, we collect our vintage cars and we find a hobby and we do all these things to make ourselves happy. And I think that's just, I mean, that made me love him even more. I was just like, ugh.
Yeah.
And so then when he does have to do the violent things, that makes it all the more tragic, really, because it's like he doesn't want to, but he's doing it because he's saving his friends and he's doing
Right.
it because like it's an emergency, like he has to. He's in peril, but it's not something that he wants to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought they did a really good job with Clement.
I do too.
I love him. Yeah.
I think my other favorite, favorite moment of his is second best friend.
Second best friend.
I was like, oh my God, where has this idea been my whole life? This is
Oh,
awesome.
you're my first. This is such a like elementary school, like middle school. You're
Yes.
my first best friend. You're my second best friend. Um, Clement, if you're taking applications, I will gladly apply for your third best friend.
So yeah, can we tie for third? Because I'm so there with you. All right, favorite. Do you have a favorite callback?
Oh, let's see here. Favorite callback. Ooh, that's hard. Um,
Or one that pops to mind that you loved? I mean, I have mine was Spike singing from the musical.
oh yeah,
That was like
yeah,
everything,
yeah, 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 yeah,
everything.
yeah, 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 absolutely, absolutely.
That was
Um,
so good. I mean, I loved all the callbacks, but that one was so unexpected,
yeah,
and that he was actually in a Sunnydale cemetery,
yeah,
and it was like everything.
yeah. So many years ago, I was like, oh, um, I loved, yeah. You know what? Actually, here's one of my. This is, and maybe it's not a callback, but it is just, but it is such a pure like character trait that as soon as it happened, I was like put right back into it. And it's Drusilla, and it's her doing her like,
Do it again, do
again,
it
do it
again.
again, do it again.
Yes,
And
I'm
she and
with
she's
you.
like doing it around and around and around. And I was like, yes, Juliet, like give me all of it. It just took me back to that place, and it just shows how like in touch with that character she is and how
Oh my God.
easily,
Yeah, she was another one who was fabulous. And
yeah.
you could even tell it was so subtle, but you could tell those slight differences um in that Drusilla, as they said, she was more ambitious.
Hmm.
She was almost a bit more coherent, and like it was so subtle, but you could tell that in the performance,
Yeah.
which just is mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, so good. Oh, yeah, it was.
So, a couple of the things I was going to talk about that kind of didn't work for me, more on
Okay.
a like small
Yeah, let's talk about
scale.
what didn't
Okay.
work. Some more about what didn't work.
Okay. The fact that Anya puts the Gem of Amara on, Gem of Amara is specifically said to
Yes.
only be for
Yes.
vampires. That
Yes.
drove me nuts.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, they were so good on so many things, and I was like, really? Really?
Right.
Like, go to the Buffy wiki page. It says it right there.
It is
Because I
specifically for vampires.
Yeah, because I did. I was like, Google just to make sure. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And I was like, yes. So that was a minor one. And then you and I had talked about this offline, but
Yeah.
the fact that Sunnydale in our universe still exists and that they can go to the magic box and it is not all sunk into
It
the
does not make
crater.
sense. It doesn't
I'm
make sense.
sorry.
It's a sinkhole in the middle of the city. Like the entire city is gone. Everything is like in the middle of Sunnydale. Like it's in
Yeah.
downtown downtown Sunnydale.
I always felt like the high school probably wasn't all that far from downtown. So
No,
like if the high school went out, then
no,
for sure downtown went out.
sure. The mall was destroyed.
Right.
They said like the mall is gone. Like
Right.
everything is gone. When they leave and they get just outside of town, literally they're on the other side. The town sign that says "Welcome to Sunnydale" falls into the thing.
Hmm.
Like there is no more town left.
Yeah.
And now I think in the comics they do talk about um like the
Oh, that's right. Like
remains of stuff, like people go down
the
into the
military like
sinkhole.
built a base or something, right? Didn't they
Yeah.
in the comics?
Like I think Amy lives down there or something like that. Like
Yeah.
there are people who survived or whatever, or they're,
Right.
which makes sense because a witch maybe like cast a protection spell around her to
Yeah.
keep her from the rubble or whatever. But like there, I think in the comics there are people who are living down in the sinkhole. So that's fine. I don't have a problem with them going back to Sunnydale and
Right.
like doing all that stuff. But the idea that like there's just this like random street on the edge of the sinkhole that
Yeah.
like didn't quite go in, and the magic box just happens to be on that.
Right.
Did like that kind of was like, okay, we could have
Yeah.
figured something out.
That
Um,
didn't work for me.
yeah.
Although funny enough, as much as that didn't work for me, if we're gonna like, okay, accept the fact that that's the case, I did like that Willow and Giles built that trap door
Yeah.
because like they didn't do stuff like that in the show. And I know that was sort of the show's decision to like not make to make things to not make things easier all the time. Like you had to like, put those challenges up so they could overcome them. But it was like it makes so much sense. There are
Right.
things that I feel like I wish they had done more with like magic, that just protective stuff that seemed like it would make so much more sense. Like all of
Especially.
Anya, all the protective spells Anya has on the
Hmm.
magic box. You're like,
Yeah.
why didn't they do that on the show?
Right. I mean, especially considering the magic box was like broken into and like destroyed every
Yes.
week. Like
How
it was
many owners were killed?
right, and all the owners before were killed and all that stuff. It
Yeah.
just didn't make any sense. I loved the I did will say for the magic box, I loved the trapdoor and I
Yes.
loved the holy water like sprinkler system going
Yes.
off. Like I really
So
liked
good.
I thought those were um great things. This is the other thing that I didn't quite get and I was a little confused about, right? And I'm because it wasn't specifically said, and so I'm just wondering if this is implied. Because the magic box is a public space,
Hmm.
vampires can enter public spaces. So my question is, was Anya and Tara living in the back of the magic shop, which made it then a residence? Because if someone is living in the place, then it becomes a residence. And so then they couldn't come in. And since their names were on the lease, and because then Tara could have let her in. But if it's just a place of business, then there was no need for the barrier spell doesn't apply.
True.
Or was there a
Unless they,
spell that
that was
they
what I was gonna
did to
say.
like make it so that you needed an
Barrier, kind
invitation?
of like a version for, public spaces or businesses. I mean, on the flip side, you could always say part of the reason vampires can come into businesses are they have a sign that says welcome, come in.
Oh
Because
yeah.
I don't know it was a dumb line, but it was still said when Angelus went to kill Miss Calendar. And
Hmm.
she's like, how did you get in? And I was like, really? It's a public school. He's also been in a million times. So, like, I always thought that was such a dumb line that she asked him that. But then he says the Latin motto of the school and had
Yeah.
something about like all
It
who,
says, welcome ye all, or something, all who seek knowledge.
right, that's it.
Yeah.
Welcome. Yeah. So it could
Welcome
be like
all.
sort of
Yeah.
the same thing. Like, I mean, I don't think that's true of the school because it's a public school, but like they screwed themselves with that comment of her going, "How did you get in?" I mean, maybe she didn't mean it in the sense of "Where's your invitation?" More that like all the doors are locked up because she was there so late at night. I never thought of that. It could be that way, but anyway,
Yeah.
it could be the same for businesses. Like they could technically have that protection, but when you put in a sign that says like "Welcome, come in,"
Yeah.
um,
Then that, yes,
breaks
we're
the
open.
magic. Yeah,
Right.
I
Because
mean,
it becomes a continuous open invitation for
correct,
anyone who wants to come in,
correct.
which is why I kind of felt like, well, all businesses are like that. So,
Yeah.
so that was a little confusing. Like to me, that was like, oh, that's a rule situation that maybe we need to like think about, but you can justify it and figure it out. It didn't, but they made such a big deal about um talking about, how are you getting in here? I didn't invite you in, and I think they made such a big deal about that. And, you know, which I felt was more of like a lead into the reveal of Tara more than anything else,
Yeah.
then so to use that device as a reveal that Tara and Anya own the shop together and Tara's gone bad as opposed to anything else. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
One thing that I thought was we missed out on was the descriptions of like new demons. I wish I knew what they looked like the
Yeah,
hummingbird creature, like Esther, like the Penthos demons. I mean, I assume the Penthos demons were more human looking just because of the fact that like people were saying Spike thought Miranda was hot.
yeah.
Um,
And she's got great boots.
but that was it's not a dislike, it's just more, I would love to like have some words to kind of describe what they look
Hmm.
like. So I didn't, I mean, I suppose from like what they do, you could kind of picture a description of someone that's a scavenger and then somebody that's a hummingbird, the
Yeah.
epitome of all the essence of all the
Yeah,
like,
I definitely got like this sort of uh, I got this idea for like that, just this idea of like the flapping of hummingbirds' wings and
yeah,
sort of like how what that looks like. It looks a little blurry when you look at it, and it looks a little like all of
yeah,
that, but like all around her,
yeah,
like her whole essence was like basically like the vibration of a hummingbird wing, but like with some sort of like humanoid body underneath that.
yeah,
Um, the scavenger, I just felt like I just literally thought about like in Thundercats, um there's a character in Thundercats that's like part vulture, part man. I just kind of had this sort of like with body
yeah,
of a woman and
yeah.
head of a vulture. Um, I went real simple with that. First, like Miranda, I really did think was like kind of sexy and a little like, a little you know, I envisioned some red hair maybe or
Yeah,
something like that, or but kind of gothy.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. I didn't have, you're right, I didn't have a really clear
And it
picture
didn't
of what
need
those
it like
people.
specifically details, but a little bit more would be
Yeah.
nice just to give us help the imagination. But yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, anything else that didn't work or
Um, let me just see. I think we talked about no, I think those were some of the I think those were the big
hmm
things for me that didn't um that didn't work. Oh, one of the things that I kind of, again, I'm not sure if it worked or whatever, or like the purpose of it. It felt more like a time filler in terms of B story stuff. Was them
hmm
turning into the Blob? Uh,
Yeah, that
like
was like not a favorite thing of mine either.
I was kind of like it felt like, okay, now we've got these people and we really don't know what to do with them.
Yeah,
And so we're gonna like spend basically like 2 episodes with them like trapped in this blob,
right.
having these weird sort of, yeah, there was just, it was like we've got these people here who shouldn't have been here in the first place because it's not about the main story, and so we have to come up with something. And so that one to me sort of felt like, what are we doing here? That sort of didn't quite work for me, but um it's an interesting thing. I mean, it's, this funny idea, and it allowed for the debate between Anya and Yanka, and to give us a little bit more context around this idea of vengeance demons and how it works and why the need
Mm,
to merge was so important, which I which I will be okay with, especially if we get more.
yeah.
But then we've killed Anyanka.
Was she killed?
They destroy Anyanka.
Oh, I totally missed that somehow.
So I'm fairly certain that that's what has happened. Um, and they like,
There was a lot going on in the climax, I
or
feel
maybe they
like.
sent her away. She's either dead or like she was sent to another dimension or whatever. But right before, because that's how Giles gets hurt, is that Anyanka
Oh, that's right. I
hurts him
forgot.
right, but like it's the last thing she does
Yeah,
before
that's
she
right.
gets destroyed or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
Um, so there's a lot of that goes on that I'm like, well, I don't know. So I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, I still overall I still think it's
Oh, 100%.
great and
Yeah.
wonderful.
I mean, as we have been discussing in our previous episodes, it's not like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the show was 100% perfect.
No, yeah.
So
I think it's great to be, I mean, that we can be critical about it. I think they do, quite frankly, I think they do a great job of
yeah,
putting this all together and world building and doing all this stuff. It's not easy. Like that's the
no.
thing. It's like especially taking someone else's work and trying to like reformulate it for something that works for you all and trying to like satisfy the fans and do but also do something new is an incredibly daunting and challenging task, and for them to take it on and be like, yeah, we're going to do it, and to make it happen is ambitious and it's amazing. And quite frankly, I think a lot of the fans are happy. I know some fans are not happy, and that's okay because you're not going to please everybody. I'm
Yeah,
pleased,
well,
and that's the only one that matters. So,
well, and the medium change. That's hard. That's hard.
sure.
That's another big transition. I think that was probably one of the things that for the critical comments I've read or the fans that didn't enjoy it, I think that was one of the primary aspects that they were not
Yeah,
getting into, which I can understand. But I also think, like any creative endeavor, if they do another series or a couple more series, you know, if they build and it grows and it gets stronger, like that would be fantastic. I would prefer that than sometimes these shows that come out like perfect out of the gate, and then once they did that like one perfect one, additional, in this case more like TV shows, for of an as an example, um that it's particularly like high concept ones, like that first season's amazing, but then they really don't have anywhere to go after, and I'm like, no, I'd rather have kind of like a so-so beginning, but you build and it gets better, which is what Buffy did. So that would be great. I'm okay with that. It didn't have to come out perfect out of the gate. I think it's great. I think it's listenable. It's great having these characters. I think they honored the characters, the actors, the universe. So that's to me the most important aspect. Do you still have any outstanding questions? I have a few outstanding questions.
Oh, let's hear your outstanding questions. What are your outstanding questions?
What the heck has Spike been doing since the end of Angel? And how does he make money? Because I love that moment where everyone's like, "Wow, Spike, you have a really nice place." I loved that, and they're like, "What do you think? I'd live in a crib?" Well, you have. So I'm like, how does he afford the nice apartment? Or I pictured it as a loft, actually, like a warehouse loft. So I'm just curious about that. These are more like curiosity. Like I need more
Sure.
backstory. Not that I felt like it was lacking.
I
Oh,
mean, I imagine that Spike has been like, honestly, I think once that whole big fight went down,
yeah.
between, at the end of Angel, I imagine that they're like, he spent a little bit more time with them. And then he just finally was like, you know what, forget this. I can't. There's a
Well, most
bigger
of them
thing
are
involved.
gone, I'm sure. I think, Lauren left, Wesley died. Who knows what happened to Illyria? Uh Gunn probably died, unless, miraculously
You
as
think they died
certain
in that fight?
well, we know Wesley did. He
Oh,
died
right.
with, Illyria. I have no idea what happened to Illyria. I don't think Angel died. I think Gunn probably died. I mean, he seemed like he was, unless he got like help right then, he was pretty literally gutted from taking on all those vamps for the senator. Um, so I could see it just being Illyria, Spike, and Angel who were left. Oh, and like I said, Lauren was like, once he completed his task to get rid of Lindsay, and the take out their member of the Blackthorn, he was like, I'm done. He told Angel that. He's like, I can't
Yeah,
do this
yeah.
anymore. So, yeah, I mean, obviously he stayed in LA. He's probably sort of doing the Spike version of well, obviously he's working with the council to some degree because there was sort of like he kind of mentions that
Yeah,
along the way, but I
because
just want to know how he made money for his nice apartment.
probably the council. I bet you,
Oh,
like
that's true. That's true.
I
He's
would
probably
imagine that
salaried.
the way that Buffy is running things now, there's a little bit more equitability and
Yes.
all of that stuff, and the stuff where like the Slayers aren't getting paid and all this other stuff. Like
Yeah.
Buffy is providing like room and board and
Yeah.
all of that for every girl who, because they are running things. They are a well-oiled machine, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
stuff happening, and they have like command base centers all over the globe.
Yeah.
So I imagine that it's a highly funded machine, and that Spike's just on the payroll.
Yeah.
Um,
Although it was kind of, they seemed to go back and forth. It was like he was connected to the council, but at the same time, like he didn't really know who to contact to help Indira. So it felt a little like it was a little wishy-washy. And maybe that was on purpose. And I'm okay with that. They'll like explain later, but it was a little weird because it felt like, oh, he was connected to them, but not at the same time. So I think to me it leaned more on the like Spike does his rogue thing, but it like helps out the council. Maybe he like it sounds like he kind of is doing to some degree what he's going to end up doing in the alternate universe is like undercover. People think he's evil again. Like maybe he's been using this time to build that reputation back up. Anyway, it was
right.
just those are
Yeah.
I'm filled with endless curiosity.
Yeah, I think even like to that question, because that does bring up a question, because I think like in our universe or whatever, like the Watchers Council, which Andrew is a Watcher now, and so
Right.
like,
That's true.
which is ridiculous, but whatever. It's great. I love it. And
Yeah.
he's very suave now, and he's like, Buffy can't see you. Like when Angel tried, he's like, she can't see you right now. She's dealing with him. When they have that whole thing, and Andrew
Yeah.
comes onto Angel and does that, like it's a I think the structure is different. And so like he interacts with Slayers a lot, I imagine. And so I think that's probably how he's getting information back to the Watchers Council or whatever, is like
Yeah,
via
but I
the
just feel like
Slayers.
he
I
was
don't
such
think
a
he's like hanging out with like Andrew and like, well, maybe he is.
no, but I mean, he was such a core part of it. Like, I can't imagine when Buffy finally finds out that he's back, that there's not at least a phone call between them. Like, where they ended up, I'm not saying they get back together. I'm not saying there's anything romantic, but like, she basically was like, he was the only one he was the only one she depended on by the end. And again, not saying her life hasn't grown, but like, that's not just a like, hey, old friend. Like, that's we make a little connection and he has the direct line to Buffy if he's working with the council, like assuming Buffy's still with the council. Maybe she's retired too, but we know Willow's in London because that was it. Anyway, lots
Yeah.
of questions. Like there's not an answer, but I have so many questions.
I'm going back through the comics for sure, just to like fill in some of
Well,
those
that's
gaps.
like so different. I mean,
I
that
know, but that's the thing. But that if that is canon, then we have to kind of like depend on that, even though we're both sort of feel like, well, maybe it's not. But I just think there's some inferences there, because yeah, you would think like you hope that like Buffy and Spike have like an amicable relationship, and I think that they do. I
I
think
would
that it's a
too.
special relationship. I just think that Buffy is at this point, I just think Buffy is way too busy with everything else to be worried about
Yeah, yeah,
what's
yeah. I mean, I just think like the way this Slayerverse story has gone on, I don't think they take the comics into canon. So like to me it's
sure.
not
But
useful.
I mean, even if you look at what happens in Angel, um, and they go to, and Angel and Spike go to find Buffy, and they run into Andrew, and he's like, "Oh, she's in Italy with this guy." Like because she's off running her life now. She's not worried about these men anymore. Those men are a part of her past. So she's like trying to move on and doing all these other things. So,
Right. If assuming that's actually Buffy.
right. But
Because
then
in the comics, if you take the comics as canon, it's a double. It's
right.
not really Buffy. Buffy was actually not in Italy.
Um, so yeah, there could be reasons for all of that. And so again, she probably isn't talking to him because it's dangerous too. Like which is why I think that's why I also think that like the using the other Slayers as like the message board to get those messages to sort of the inner circle of people, is
Oh,
the
you
form
mean
of
like if he's doing undercover stuff?
Right, where he's like, oh,
Okay.
I'm getting stuff to the council, and how he's doing that is by talking
Okay,
to
that would
other
make sense.
slayers
Yeah, yeah.
because it's too dangerous for all of them to be together in the same place.
Well, I wouldn't think they'd be in the same place, but I would think he could like, Willow could set up some sort of like magic phone that would be like prevent, people
Yep.
being able to access it or listen to it. And so he could still like make calls. Anyway, we're getting way too into this. This is a whole different debate. The other question I have is well, once Cordelia thought Giles was dead, as we know, he's not dead in her world. Like, who's her watcher? Does she connect with the Watchers Council? Like, what's the Watchers Council role in her life? These are questions I have.
Yeah.
And again, they may get answered. I'm just saying that's like some of
Yep.
the question that popped up. Oh,
Yeah.
one thing I have to go back that I didn't really like. Speaking of all of this with the characters we didn't see from our universe of Buffy. Spike says that he hasn't trusted Willow in years.
Hmm.
And I was like, what? That didn't make sense. If he was going to be mad at anyone, he should be mad at Giles. And he obviously wasn't because Giles is the one who wouldn't help them when Fred was dying. So, like, I don't know, maybe something happened in the intervening years, but I don't
Yeah.
know. That just felt weird. And I didn't
Yeah, there's
understand why it
something.
was said.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Like, I don't know what I don't I'm not sure what it is that Willow did that makes him not
Yeah.
trust her. Other
Yeah,
than, I mean,
it just
other
didn't
than
feel
it,
necessary if they weren't going to go somewhere with it.
right. But I guess unless you're trying to like sort of wrap in some of the things that Willow did over the course of, especially in the later seasons and things that she, and even just in that fight at the end of season 7 when they all kick her out and all of that stuff, where he's like, oh, okay. Um,
Yeah, I guess
maybe that's where the start of it happens, where he's like, okay, so do you really have her back all the time? But then we're doing this thing that's really cool. So I don't know. It was a weird thing to say. I think there might be breadcrumbs of reasons why he doesn't, but for him to be so like pointed about saying it felt odd.
yes. My whole thing is then he shouldn't have been like friendly with Giles because like you could argue equally he has no reason to trust Giles, maybe more than Willow. So I'm
Sure.
just saying if it like doesn't go anywhere and it was a throwaway line, I wish they hadn't done it because it just didn't make sense to me.
Right.
But anyway. All right. So last thing, unless you have something else you want to say overall.
Nope. I'm good.
So the whole, as we know, part of the whole purpose of the audio drama was to bring justice to Cordelia particularly, but also Tara and Anya. And so this question sort of ties into the theme of our overall season for our other episodes discussing feminism and gender in the Buffy verse or in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, now expanding to the universe. Do you think justice was served for Cordelia, Tara, and Anya?
Well, I'm going to add and the fans into that statement.
Good
I'm going to
addition.
add that was justice served for all those people. I would say that for Cordelia, I would say yes. I feel like justice for Cordelia was I was served. Here's the thing. Let me go back. I will say I am hopeful that it will be served for everyone, right? I think we are in a place where um, the pathway to justice is long, and if we get more and we get like the growth and development of the story, I think that justice could be served for these characters. I think we are starting to make amends to these characters, and to give them an opportunity to have a new voice and to find and to give them the depth of character that they never really necessarily got while they were on the show, especially Anya and Tara.
Mm-hmm.
I think as far as the fans go, was justice served for me. Hell yes. I got all the things that like I got the stuff that I wanted. Was everything perfect? No, but justice isn't perfect. You take what you get and you're happy with it. I really liked what we got. I want more. Um and I think it's a great way to continue on the series using the original actors. I think it's smart. Um I think it's relevant and contemporary. Um, again, the only other way I think you could probably maybe shoot for like an animated series kind of situation, which may or
Mhm.
may not work, to do the sort of same thing, which yay, maybe. But I really like this sort of like audio drama podcasty sort of uh route that they're going, especially because, the fan base is so into that realm, I think. I mean, considering the number of podcasts that are created out of the
What are
show
you
alone,
talking about? I have
it's
no idea.
ridiculous. We're everywhere. So so Justice for Cordelia, I think for the act, and again, I don't want to speak for the actresses, so I won't. Um, for the characters, I think the characters got to do some really cool and interesting things. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily justice. I think it's an amends. I think it's you know, a reparation for those characters. And as a fan, I feel like I felt the payoff listening to it originally. The payoff was great.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I don't know if even though that's, what the actors and the writers have said about one of the impetuses for this drama is bringing justice to those characters. I agree. I don't know if that's quite the right word, but I do think they get served really well. Cordelia, yes, I agree. The best. She got served so much better. Um, certainly than what was happening to her, and we all know why from what she's spoken and said in season 4 of Angel. I think with Anya, I never felt like Anya needed justice. I get people were upset the way she was killed at the end. I understand that. I didn't necessarily feel that way. I don't know that she had to die, but I never felt the anger that, some or the injustice that certain fans felt about her death. Um, that being said, one thing you and I have talked about, maybe on our podcast, but definitely offline, is the inconsistency in Anya's character development. She
Yeah,
feels like
absolutely.
all over the place, and partly because it was more that she felt like she was just brought in for comic relief, and then they were like, "Oh, we got to like do stuff with her," and you're like, "I feel like a rubber ball being bounced around with what we're supposed to think about Anya." So I do think she was given consistent character and character development. And I also really like that there was, whether Cordelia saw it or not, in the alternative universe, it was about sisterhood. It was about female friendships with Tara, Cordelia, and Anya, and them finding a way forward after experiencing, trauma and changes in their life. So I really like that. I feel like Tara was the least served. Um, but again, if it continues, there could be some interesting character development to deal with the aftermath of what happened in here. For me, it just goes back to her storyline fully not working for me. I didn't think she was, um, it's not like she was underserved or torn apart or anything as a character. It's not like that was a character assassination. I kind of wanted more from her storyline. That's all.
Yes, definitely want more.
Yes. And to your point too, as far as format, compared to getting an animated series, which, the popularity of this might revive that conversation because obviously, again, you don't have to factor in aging. People can record from home if they, can't get to a studio if they're living in London versus LA versus, New York. But I do think, I mean, you have the added expense of animation. So doing the radio drama, I would imagine, is even easier and less expensive.
Yeah.
Um, and who knows, depending on how this goes and what if any of the other former cast members listen and what they hear with it, that may get them excited and say, hey, can we do another one? I want to do it this time.
Yeah, and maybe that we'll get some more people on and people who'll be
Right,
like, "Oh yeah, let's do this." And then they can
right,
sort of like rebuild the universe
right.
on their own terms. And I think that, to me, that's what I would be excited about, is seeing, the universe rebuilt on the terms of the artists who worked in it.
Hmm.
I think there's something incredibly um satisfying and fulfilling
Hmm.
about that idea. There's something so incredibly like contemporary about that in terms of what we're doing right now when we're talking, like if we're talking about justice and we're talking about these things about what artists are trying to achieve and what they're trying to do with the strike and all of those things. I feel like that's just the direction that we should be going in, is that
Hmm.
it's not these studios and it's not these big producers and stuff like that who should be controlling the fate of story
Right,
and the artists who are working on it, but let the artists who are working on it and like develop and be a part of the collective that drives the thing, because they're the things that the fans are into. They're the ones who we come to see, at conventions, and those are the ones that we have the attachment to. So let
right.
them have the ownership and the control of how that works. And
Yeah,
see what happens. We don't always know what that looks like. Um, right now I'm here for it. So I would say let's keep going.
absolutely. And also, we absolutely need Ripper Giles vampire. Because
Oh my
that's the vibe I
gosh.
got from Vamp
The
Giles. It was
end.
total like Ripper vampire.
The end, I'm like, if we like in book two, if we're not in season two, whatever we want to call it, like if we're not getting like Ripper Giles vampire, if we're not getting Willow, if we're not getting Angelus,
Oh,
like
yes.
those are the three that like I want to see. Those three.
Yes.
I want to see Angelus, Willow, and Giles as a vampire, like coming back with Drusilla fighting or something like that, or something completely different, but like hints of them, like
Yeah.
teases of them in the second book to lead into a third book that
Right.
brings them all back,
Right.
for
Because
that
yeah,
fight.
maybe like book two is us seeing Spike build his reputation and taking over
Right.
Sunnydale.
Mhm.
But not until like the next chapter do they take down Drusilla, and maybe it's take down Angelus.
Right. And I feel like bringing back Drusilla in the second book, maybe not so much. Maybe like
Right.
hints, again,
Yep.
like hints and teases of what she's doing, but
Yeah.
it's more about like Spike building his rep. And
Yep.
maybe there's another thing. Maybe the mayor's there. Like maybe he's like
Oh my God, that'd be
hooking up with the
amazing.
mayor like some weird way. Like maybe there's something happening there that we get to see. And there's this whole development of those things happening.
Bring
Or
back Mr. Trick.
yeah, Mr. Trick, like let's see Trick come back. Like that Mr. Trick would be great.
Yes.
As another as a person, or Kendra, like, I mean, granted, now we probably won't see Kendra because there isn't,
Oh yeah.
we're not
How
going
the
to
heck
see.
has Cordelia been a vampire slayer for 19 years? That's my other question. I
She is
know.
that good. She must be that good for sure. Um, yeah, there's a lot.
Mhm.
There's so much potential for everything that's happening. And I there's so many different things that they could do, and I'm excited to, as a fan, to be able to watch and see what's happening and what they possibly come up with next. So Audible, please
Yes.
do another one, please. We are here. I
Part
am
two, part
part
two.
two. We want a part two. Please.
Well, thank you so much for everyone for listening in to this bonus episode. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you are having fun conversations about the Audible series as well. And if you liked what you heard, please leave us a review. And you can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Buffy Podcast. And if you want to get in touch with us, how can you do that, Charles?
You can email us if you want to at buffypodcast@gmail.com. You can slide into our DMs. We always love that. And we're all over socials at a Buffy podcast. Yeah, every we're all over the place. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and I'm also on TikTok. I'm personally on TikTok. If you want to follow me on TikTok, it's Charlie D&D. On TikTok, you can follow me, and I do some extra Buffy content on there as well.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.